Show me the heart you conceal.
There's a moment in one of Lisa Marie Presley's final recorded interviews where the person across from her asks about Graceland. It's a soft question, the kind meant to be easy, and for a second she smiles. But then they mention the upstairs, and everything changes. Her face doesn't just shift, it closes. She looks down, touches her necklace, and when she speaks again, her voice has dropped into something that sounds less like nostalgia and more like dread. She says the upstairs is still exactly how her father left it. And then she stops. Not because the interview ended, but because she chose to stop. That moment, brief as it was, is the closest the public ever got to hearing Lisa Marie Presley tell the truth about what living in that house actually meant. As Graceland is one of the most famous homes in the world, millions of people have walked through its gates, stood in its jungle room, stared at the gold records on the walls. But no one, not one of those millions, has ever been allowed upstairs. It's not a suggestion. It's not a polite boundary. It's an iron rule enforced by the estate with the kind of seriousness you'd expect around a crime scene, not a bedroom. Even staff members who've worked there for decades have never set foot on that second floor. Even close family, people who loved Elvis, people who had every reason to want to feel close to him after he was gone, were told no. And here's the part that should bother you. That's not normal. There are other celebrity homes that have been turned into museums. Hemingway's house in Key West, Graceland's contemporary in that regard, lets you walk through his writing studio. You can stand where he stood. You can see his typewriter. The Kennedy compound has hosted historians and film crews and family members for decades. But Graceland's upstairs, the place where Elvis Presley spent the final years of his life, the place where he actually died, is sealed off as if opening it would release something into the world that can never be put back. And maybe, in a sense, it would. Lisa Marie didn't just visit that house. She lived there. She grew up in those hallways. She was a child running up and down stairs that are now roped off like they contain something contagious. And she spent the rest of her life carrying the weight of what she saw up there, what she knew was still up there, and what she was never supposed to talk about. In private conversations, some of which have surfaced through people she trusted, Lisa Marie reportedly described the upstairs not as a preserved tribute, but as a kind of tomb. Not for her father's body, but for his truth. She said once, to someone close to her, that the upstairs was the part of her father that never left. Not his spirit, his reality, the one the rest of the world wasn't allowed to see. You have to ask yourself why a daughter would be afraid of her father's bedroom. Not sad, not nostalgic, afraid. And the answer isn't ghosts. It isn't the supernatural. It's what that room represents. It's the evidence still sitting on the nightstands, still tucked into drawers, still written in his own handwriting on scraps of paper that were never cleaned up, because cleaning them up would mean confronting what they said. And Lisa Marie grew up in a house where her father's addiction was managed, enabled, and obscured by the very people who were supposed to protect him. And when he died, those people didn't dismantle the machine. They just redirected it. The upstairs became a capsule, not of memory, but of liability. And Lisa Marie knew it. She knew that what was up there, if it ever came to light, would unravel the entire story the estate had spent 50 years building. It would turn the tragic, romanticized version of Elvis's death into something far uglier, something that involved names and prescriptions, and people who are still alive, still profiting, still controlling the narrative. So the doors stayed closed. The tours stopped at the base of the stairs. And the little girl who used to live up there grew into a woman who could barely talk about it without her body betraying how much it still haunted her. She once described the experience of walking through Graceland as an adult, after it had become a museum, as deeply disturbing. She said it felt like watching strangers walk through a crime scene and smile, because to them, it was history. To her, it was the place where her childhood ended, where her father's life was slowly, methodically dismantled by the people who claimed to love him. And the part of the house that held the most evidence of that dismantling, the rooms where it actually happened, where the pill bottles piled up and the decline became undeniable, that part was kept pristine and untouchable, not out of respect, out of fear. What Lisa Marie revealed in her final years, in fragments, in moments when her guard was down, suggests something that should disturb anyone who cares about the truth. The upstairs isn't preserved because it's sacred, it's preserved because it's dangerous. It contains a version of Elvis Presley's last days that doesn't fit the brand. And brands, especially ones worth hundreds of millions of dollars, don't survive inconvenient truths. They survive by making sure those truths stay exactly where Lisa Marie left them, locked upstairs, in the dark, where no one asked questions. Lisa Marie Presley didn't just inherit a mansion. She inherited a truth so heavy it shaped every relationship she ever had, every marriage that fell apart, every public appearance where she looked like she was carrying something no one else in the room could see. Well, because she was. She grew up inside the reality that the rest of the world was never supposed to witness. And what she saw in those upstairs rooms, what she lived with as a little girl, wasn't the Elvis of the concert films or the comeback specials. It was the Elvis that the estate spent decades making sure you would never meet. In the years before her death, Lisa Marie began speaking more openly, though never fully, about what her childhood at Graceland actually looked like. She described walking into her father's bedroom and seeing prescription bottles scattered across every surface. Not one or two, dozens. She said the nightstands, the bathroom counter, even the floor near his bed were crowded with orange plastic vials, each one labeled with a different doctor's name, a different pharmacy, a different date. And she was 9 years old when he died. And by then she had already learned not to ask what they were for, because asking meant acknowledging that something was very, very wrong. And no one in that house was allowed to acknowledge that. She told people, years later, that there were moments when she would come home from school and find her father unconscious, not asleep, unconscious. And the adults around him, the people whose job it was to protect him, would simply step over him or wait for him to come around, as if this were routine, as if the most famous man in the world being unresponsive in the middle of the afternoon was just part of the schedule. She described a kind of controlled chaos, a house that looked pristine on the outside, but was secretly organized around one man's complete physical and psychological collapse. And everyone in that system, from the doctors to the security to the hangers-on, had a role to play in making sure the collapse stayed private. More than 90% of the people watching this video right now still aren't subscribed. And that means most people are missing out on exclusive, untold stories about Elvis Presley you won't find anywhere else. If you don't want to miss the next revelation, now's the time. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video with one friend. Now let's continue. What makes Lisa Marie's account so devastating is that she wasn't speculating. She wasn't piecing together a story from rumors or secondhand gossip. She was there. She saw the medical equipment that was brought in during the final year. She saw the nurses who came and went quietly, who were paid in cash and told not to talk. And she saw her father's handwriting deteriorate on notes he would leave around the house. Notes that she said became less and less coherent as the months went on. And all of it, every piece of that wreckage, was left exactly where it fell when he died. Because moving it, cataloging it, or God forbid, letting anyone outside the inner circle examine it would have meant admitting what had really been happening in that house. In conversations with ex-husbands, close friends, and even some family members, Lisa Marie allegedly revealed something that should chill anyone who cares about how this story has been sold to the public. She said that the upstairs rooms still contain the original prescription vials, not replicas, not cleaned out props for the museum. The actual bottles with the actual labels, filled out by the actual doctors who were writing scripts at a pace that would eventually come under federal scrutiny. She suggested that there were medical logs up there, records kept by the private nurses, daily documentation of what was being administered, when, and in what quantities. And if those logs still exist, if they're sitting in a drawer or a closet on that second floor, they would tell a story that directly contradicts the official cause of death. Because the official story says Elvis died of cardiac arrhythmia, a heart that gave out under the strain of years of excess. It's a narrative that allows for sympathy without accountability. But the records Lisa Marie described, if they're real, if they're as detailed as she suggested, would show a pharmaceutical load so extreme that the heart failure, if it even happened the way it was reported, was not a tragic inevitability. It was a predicted outcome. And the people managing that pharmaceutical load knew it. Lisa Marie didn't just inherit the house, she inherited the moral weight of what happened inside it. And in her final years, as her relationship with her mother Priscilla became increasingly strained, as battles over the estate's control turned legal and public, there were signs that Lisa Marie wanted to do something the estate had never allowed. She wanted transparency. She wanted the world to understand that her father's death wasn't just sad, it was preventable. And the people who didn't prevent it, the ones who enabled it, who profited from it, who built an empire on the sanitized version of his collapse, were still in control. She was writing a memoir, and it was unfinished when she died. The drafts have never been released, and according to people close to the process, the estate moved quickly to secure any material she had been working on. There are suggestions, nothing confirmed, but whispered among people who knew her, that she intended to include a chapter about the upstairs, about what she grew up seeing, about what's still there, about why it's never been opened to outside examination, not by journalists, not by medical historians, not even by the family members who have asked. She told someone once, in a moment of exhaustion and honesty, that if people saw what she grew up seeing in those rooms, they would understand her whole life differently. They would understand why she struggled the way she did, and why she couldn't just smile through the Graceland tours and the Elvis tributes and the endless commercialization of her father's image, because she knew the image was a lie. And the proof of that lie was still sitting upstairs, untouched, exactly where it was the day he died. And the people who controlled that house, who controlled that narrative, made sure it stayed that way, not to honor him, to protect themselves. This isn't about preserving a legend, it's about protecting a business. And the difference between those two things is the difference between truth and profit. Graceland generates tens of millions of dollars every single year. It's not just a tourist attraction, it's a branded experience, a carefully curated emotional product designed to make you feel like you've touched something sacred. And the entire operation is built on a foundation that requires one thing above all else: that the story of how Elvis Presley died remains exactly as it was written in 1977. Tragic, yes. Untimely, absolutely. But ultimately natural. A king brought down by his own excess, not by the people around him. That story works. It sells tickets, it moves merchandise, and it keeps the lawyers quiet. But if someone with the legal authority and the moral standing ever forced open those upstairs rooms, if they ever allowed a forensic team, a medical historian, or even an independent journalist to walk through and document what Lisa Marie said was still there, the entire foundation of that story would crack. Because what a real examination would reveal isn't just prescription bottles and medical logs. It's a documented record of who had access, and who was writing the prescriptions, who was administering the drugs, and who knew exactly what was happening while it was happening. It would show a system, not a tragedy. A system. Dr. George Nikopoulos, Dr. Nick, was eventually put on trial for overprescribing. The quantities he admitted to were staggering, and even then, he was acquitted. The defense argued that he was trying to help Elvis, that he was managing an impossible patient. But here's what that trial didn't include. It didn't include the full scope of what was in that house. It didn't include testimony from the nurses who were there daily. It didn't include the logs that might still be sitting in a filing cabinet or a bedroom drawer on the second floor of Graceland. And it certainly didn't include the other doctors, the other enablers, the other people who had financial and professional reasons to keep Elvis functional just long enough to finish the next tour, sign the next contract, make the next appearance. If those records exist, and Lisa Marie believed they did, then they represent something far more dangerous than bad press. They represent liability, legal, financial, reputational liability that could reach beyond Elvis himself and implicate people who are still alive. People who built careers on their proximity to him. People who control pieces of the estate, who sit on boards, who have spent 50 years positioning themselves as protectors of his legacy. A forensic examination of that upstairs wouldn't just rewrite history. It would reopen questions that powerful people have spent millions of dollars making sure stay closed. And Lisa Marie was the only person who could have forced it open. She wasn't a journalist. She wasn't a conspiracy theorist. She was the sole heir, the legal owner, the one person with the standing to walk into that house and say, "We're done protecting the lie." But she was also a woman who spent her entire adult life fighting to be heard inside a family structure that had never prioritized her voice. Her relationship with her mother, Priscilla, fractured publicly in the months before her death. They fought over control of the estate. They fought over decisions involving Graceland, and beneath all of it was a fundamental disagreement about what the estate was supposed to be. Priscilla saw it as a legacy to protect. Lisa Marie saw it as a truth that had been buried. She died on January 12, 2023. She was 54 years old. And the official cause of death was cardiac arrest, the same words that appeared on her father's death certificate 46 years earlier. She collapsed at home. Paramedics were called. She was pronounced dead hours later at a hospital. And within days, the fight over her estate, over who would control Graceland, over what would happen to the trust she had set up for her children, began in earnest. Priscilla challenged the validity of the trust. Legal motions were filed. And in the chaos of grief and litigation, one question went almost entirely unasked. Had Lisa Marie ever tried to go public with what she knew? And if she had, who stopped her? There are people close to her who say she was getting ready to, that the memoir she was working on wasn't just a celebrity tell-all, but it was an attempt to reclaim the narrative of her father's death from the people who had controlled it for half a century, that she wanted to name names, that she wanted to explain in her own words what it was like to grow up in a house where everyone knew her father was dying and no one did anything to stop it. But memoir drafts don't publish themselves. And when the author dies suddenly, before the book is finished, the people who control the estate get to decide what happens to those pages. And in this case, those people had every reason to make sure certain chapters never saw the light of day. Lisa Marie's death didn't just remove a daughter from the story, it removed the last living witness, the last person who had been inside those rooms when they mattered. And the last person who could speak with first-hand authority about what happened in that house and who was responsible. And now that she's gone, the estate is back in the hands of people who benefit from silence. The upstairs stays sealed. The tours continue. The story stays clean. And the truth, whatever's left of it, stays exactly where it's been for nearly 50 years. Locked behind a velvet rope on the second floor of the most famous house in Memphis. Not because it's sacred, because it's evidence. And evidence in the hands of the wrong people, or the right ones, depending on how you look at it, is the most dangerous thing a brand can face. Graceland is no longer controlled by someone who lived there. It's no longer in the hands of someone who remembers what those rooms smelled like, what the air felt like when something was wrong, what it was like to be a child trying to make sense of why the adults were pretending everything was fine. It's now held in a trust, managed on behalf of Lisa Marie's daughters, young women who were barely adults when their mother died. And while they are the legal beneficiaries, they are not the ones making the decisions. Trusts don't operate in a vacuum. They have managers, advisors, lawyers, people whose job is to preserve value, not pursue truth. And preserving value, in this case, means keeping everything exactly as it is. Priscilla Presley attempted to challenge the trust shortly after Lisa Marie's death. She claimed there were irregularities, questioned the validity of certain amendments Lisa Marie had made in the final years of her life. The legal battle was public, bitter, and eventually settled out of court. And what wasn't settled, what was never even addressed in any of the filings, was the question of access. Who decides what happens to the upstairs? Who decides whether it ever gets examined, documented, or open to anyone outside the tightly controlled circle that has managed Graceland since 1977? The answer is the same people who have always decided, the ones who profit from the story staying intact. And here's the thing that should unsettle you. There is no one left who was in that house during the final years of Elvis's life who is both alive and free to talk. The staff members who were there are bound by non-disclosure agreements so ironclad that even decades later, they don't speak. The family members who might have had insight are either gone or were never given access in the first place. While Lisa Marie was the last person with both the first-hand knowledge and the legal authority to force a reckoning. And now she's gone. The Graceland tours continue. Hundreds of thousands of people every year walk through the ground floor, stand in the rooms where Elvis entertained, where he watched television, where he lived the parts of his life that were safe to show. And at the base of the staircase, they stop. They look up. Some of them ask why they can't go further. And the guides give the same answer they've been giving for decades, out of respect for the family, to preserve his privacy. But privacy is for the living, and Elvis Presley has been dead for nearly 50 years. What's being preserved up there isn't his dignity. It's a narrative, and that narrative is worth far more than the truth has ever been. On Lisa Marie, Lisa was reportedly working on a memoir when she died. She had been meeting with writers, conducting interviews, revisiting painful memories she had spent most of her life trying to avoid. People close to the project say she was determined to tell her story in her own words, without the filter of the estate, without the approval of the people who had spent decades managing her father's image. There were suggestions that she intended to write about the upstairs, about what she saw as a child, about what's still there, about why it matters. That manuscript was never finished. The drafts that existed at the time of her death were secured by the estate. They have not been released. They likely never will be. What happens now is what always happens when the truth becomes inconvenient to the people who control the story. That it gets managed. It gets quietly buried under legal language and family privacy and the polite fiction that some things are too sacred to disturb. But there's nothing sacred about a cover-up. There's nothing respectful about sealing off the place where a man slowly died while the people around him counted ticket sales and tour dates. Lisa Marie knew that. She spent her entire life knowing it. And the fact that she died before she could say it out loud, in a way that couldn't be ignored or suppressed, is not a coincidence. It's a conclusion. The last witness is gone. The doors stay locked, and the estate gets exactly what it always wanted: silence. If this story found you, don't let it end here. Share it before the algorithm decides you've seen enough. Subscribe if you're done letting estates rewrite the truth. Well, Lisa Marie deserved to tell her story. They made sure she couldn't. The least we can do is make sure people hear why.